You're grinding seeds by a river. It's an ordinary morning. Your kids are chasing each other near the water. Someone's cooking. Someone's arguing about nothing, the way people always do. The sky is clear. Then, far in the distance, the horizon changes color. Not sunset orange, wrong orange. A color that doesn't belong in the sky at that hour, spreading upward like something underneath the earth just tore open. Within minutes, the light around you starts dimming, even though it's the middle of the day. Birds go silent all at once, which is somehow worse than any sound could be. And then you feel it before you hear it. A low pressure in your chest. Like the air itself just got heavier. You have no idea what's happening. There's no word for this yet. There's no myth to explain it yet. There's no warning system, no news report, no emergency siren. Just a wrongness in the sky that every instinct in your body is screaming at you to run from. This is the story of what ancient humans actually did when a volcano erupted with almost no warning. And it's a story that, depending on which piece of evidence you believe, either nearly wiped our species off the face of the earth or proved that we were far more resilient than anyone expected. Both theories are real. Both are backed by scientists. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why this is still one of the most unresolved arguments in all of human prehistory. Let's start with the basics because most people radically underestimate what a volcano is actually capable of. You're picturing lava right now, probably. A slow river of orange creeping across the ground while people calmly walk away from it. Forget that image. Lava rarely kills anyone. It moves slowly enough that a healthy adult can usually outwalk it. The real killers are faster, quieter, and far more indiscriminate. And there are three of them. The first is the blast itself. A pyroclastic flow, not smoke, not ash, drifting gently through the air. A wall of superheated gas, ash, and rock fragments moving down a volcano's slope at speeds exceeding 700 kilometers an hour, at temperatures that can exceed 1,000 degrees Celsius. It doesn't give you time to run. At Pompeii, researchers studying the body, casts left behind, the eerily preserved shapes of people caught mid-motion, found something disturbing. Many victims died in postures suggesting the heat killed them almost instantly, frozen in shock, not gradual suffering. Whatever hit them so fast their nervous systems didn't have time to register it as pain. The second killer is ashfall, and this one is sneakier because it looks like snow, gray, drifting, almost peaceful from far enough away. It is not peaceful. Volcanic ash is made of tiny, jagged fragments of pulverized rock and glass. Breathe enough of it in, and it shreds your lungs. Heavy ashfall collapses shelters under its weight. It buries water sources. It blocks out the sun so completely that day becomes indistinguishable from night, sometimes for weeks, and it travels, spreading across entire continents that never even heard the explosion that produced it. The third killer is the one nobody thinks about because it doesn't happen in the first hour. It happens over years. Enough ash and sulfur dioxide pumped into the upper atmosphere can block sunlight globally, dropping temperatures, disrupting rainfall, triggering what scientists call a volcanic winter. This is the slow killer. It doesn't care whether you were close to the volcano or 1,000 kilometers away. If it's big enough, it comes for everyone. There was one eruption, one single event in deep prehistory, so massive that some scientists believe it may have done exactly that to our entire species. It's called the Toba supereruption, and it happened in what's now Sumatra, Indonesia, roughly 74,000 years ago. Toba ejected somewhere around 2,800 cubic kilometers of material. For comparison, Mount Pinatubo in 1991, one of the most powerful eruptions of the 20th century, an event that cooled global temperatures for a full year, ejected roughly 10 cubic kilometers. Toba wasn't in the same category. It's considered one of the largest volcanic events of the last 25 million years. In the 1990s, a geologist named Stanley Ambrose noticed something strange buried in our own DNA. Modern humans, spread across every continent, every climate on Earth, show remarkably low genetic diversity compared to other great apes. Chimpanzees, confined to a much smaller range, actually carry more genetic variation among themselves than humans do globally. That shouldn't be true for a species this successful. Ambrose's theory, now called the Toba catastrophe theory, offered an explanation. What if the eruption triggered a volcanic winter so severe it crashed the global human population down to just a few thousand breeding individuals? A genetic bottleneck, a near extinction event. Every human alive today descended from a tiny surviving population that made it through years of ash-darkened skies and a climate that had turned against them with no warning at all. Sit with that for a second. Every person you've ever met, every civilization, every war, every love story, every argument you've ever had might trace back to a small handful of people who happened to survive one volcano on one island 74,000 years ago. We came that close. Now picture one of them, a woman, somewhere south of Toba, days after the sky went dark. She hasn't seen the sun in what feels like weeks. The air still tastes like ash. Her children are hungry in a way she doesn't have an answer for. Every plant she knows how to find is buried under gray dust, and the animals that used to be here have either died or moved on to wherever animals go when the world stops making sense. She doesn't know she's living through what scientists will one day call a bottleneck event. She doesn't know her survival right now, in this exact moment, might be the reason any of us exist at all. She just knows she has to find water today and tomorrow and the day after that. That's the whole plan. That's the entire weight resting on one person's shoulders, and she has no idea she's carrying it. For years, that story, humanity nearly died, then didn't, was treated as close to settled fact. It's dramatic, it's clean, it fits a satisfying arc, but the deeper scientists dug, the messier that clean narrative became. In the early 2000s, archaeologists working at a site called Jwalapuram in southern India found something that directly challenges the catastrophe theory. Buried in the soil is a distinct layer of ash, chemically confirmed as Tobas, and directly above and below that ash layer, researchers found stone tools, not scattered debris from some unrelated population showing up later. Continuous evidence of tool making, the same tradition on both sides of the eruption. People were living in that region before Toba erupted, and people, quite possibly the same people, were living there afterward too. Not a total wipeout. Continuity. A group that lived through one of the largest volcanic events in 25 million years and just kept making tools the same way they always had. So now you've got two serious evidence-backed positions in direct conflict. One says Toba nearly ended us, and the proof is written into our DNA to this day. The other says, at least in some regions, people absorbed the blow and kept going almost without missing a beat. Which one is true? Honestly, the most accurate answer right now is that we don't fully know, and researchers on both sides are still actively arguing about it. Some newer genetic studies push back on how severe the bottleneck really was, suggesting the population decline may have already been underway for other climate reasons before Toba even erupted, and that the eruption was one stressor among several, not a single apocalyptic trigger. Other researchers point out that regional survival at one site doesn't rule out catastrophic losses somewhere else entirely. Maybe some populations were wiped out completely, while others, in the right place, with the right resources, made it through relatively intact. What this tells us, more than anything, is that ancient humans survived a volcano isn't one story. It's potentially thousands of different stories happening in thousands of different places, and we're still piecing together which ones ended in silence and which ones ended in survival. So let's talk about what survival actually required, because whichever population you're talking about, the people who made it through were doing something right in those critical first hours, when the sky had gone wrong and nobody had a word for it yet. Here's where the title of this video needs a small asterisk. A sudden pyroclastic blast genuinely can happen with almost no notice, but many eruptions, especially the ones that build for weeks before the actual explosion, come with warning signs, small tremors as magma pushes toward the surface, a sulfurous smell in the air, springs and wells running dry or behaving strangely as the water table shifts underground, and animals. Researchers have documented cases of livestock and wildlife growing restless or fleeing an area hours before a major eruption or earthquake. It's entirely likely that ancient groups who lived generation after generation near volcanic regions learned to read some of these signs without understanding a single thing about the geology behind them, not as science, as memory. Picture an old man in that same community, decades before the eruption ever happens. He's the one who remembers the last time the ground rumbled like a drum being struck underground, the last time the wells ran strange, the last time the birds went quiet in the middle of the day. He tells the story again at the fire that night, the way he's told it 100 times before. Half the group only half listening. Most years, nothing happens. Most years, it's just an old man's story, until one year it isn't, and the only reason anyone in that group knows to run before the sky finishes changing color is because somebody, decades ago, refused to stop telling it. This is where a group's elders become genuinely, measurably valuable in a way that's easy to overlook. A community that had lived near volcanic ground for generations wasn't starting from zero every time. They were drawing on institutional memory, passed down entirely through spoken word about what came before and what to do when they saw it again. For eruptions that genuinely struck without usable warning, survival came down to a brutally simple set of priorities. Get away from the volcano's likely flow path, which meant understanding local terrain well enough to know which valleys funneled pyroclastic flows and which ridgelines might offer protection. Get away from low-lying ground where heavier volcanic gases pool and settle, and almost immediately after, protect your airway, wet cloth, animal hide, or simply cupped hands over the nose and mouth to filter the worst of the ash. Not sophisticated. Also, exactly what what modern emergency guidance still recommends today, because the physics of not breathing in rock dust hasn't changed in 100,000 years. The aftermath, though, was often worse than the eruption itself because it lasted so much longer. Ashfall poisoned water. It buried crops and drove away the animals people depended on for food. Animals dealing with the exact same disaster. Groups that survived the initial blast often faced a slower, quieter crisis afterward, a landscape that no longer produced what it used to for months, sometimes years. This is very likely where the real death toll of these events actually lived, not in the dramatic first hour, in the grinding, unglamorous famine that came after everyone stopped paying attention. Now here's the part almost nobody talks about, and it's the part that actually explains something genuinely strange. If volcanoes were this dangerous, why do we find, across the entire span of human history, communities who chose to live near them anyway, not tolerated the risk, chose it generation after generation for thousands of years, right up to today, because volcanoes give as much as they take, sometimes more. Volcanic ash, once it weathers down over time, produces some of the most fertile soil on the planet, rich in the exact minerals plants need most. Regions built on volcanic soil, the highlands of Ethiopia, the slopes of Java, parts of Central America, have historically supported some of the densest agricultural populations in the world. People weren't ignoring the danger. They were making a calculated trade that entire civilizations have kept making for millennia. Extraordinary fertility now, in exchange for catastrophic risk, eventually someday, maybe not this generation. Volcanic regions also produce obsidian, naturally occurring volcanic glass that, fractured correctly, creates an edge sharper than a modern surgical scalpel. For ancient tool makers, this wasn't just useful, it was extraordinary. Obsidian has been found traded hundreds of kilometers from its source, into the hands of people who'd never seen an active volcano in their lives, a resource born directly from the same violence that could kill you, becoming one of the most prized materials of the ancient world. So the relationship ancient humans had with volcanoes was never simple fear. It was respect, calculated risk, a negotiation with something you can't control but can sometimes learn to live beside. Which brings us back to where we started. That ordinary morning, the sky turning the wrong color, the silence of the birds, the pressure in your chest before you understood why. We'll never know exactly how many groups faced that moment across the last few 100,000 years and didn't make it through. We know some groups nearly didn't, if Ambrose's bottleneck theory holds. We know other groups, like the tool makers at Jualapuram, apparently just kept going. Ash layer be damned. What we can say with real confidence is this. The people who survived weren't lucky in some passive sense. They survived because somewhere behind them was a chain of memory, which valley to avoid, which way the wind usually blew, what the ground felt like right before the last bad one, and that memory had to be spoken out loud by someone who believed the next generation might need it just as badly as they once did. Today we have seismographs, satellite monitoring, an alert that can reach a phone in someone's pocket an hour before disaster. For nearly the entire span of human existence, the only early warning system we had was a person at a fire, telling a story one more time, just in case. We are all in the end still sitting at that same fire. We're just the ones who happen to be listening.